Hey everybody, welcome to the beginning of our squat module. Now, if you've peeked ahead and seen some of the outline here in it, you'll note that we're going to cover performance points under the barbell, in front of the barbell. We're going to cover common faults, give you fixes for those faults, and even some subsequent drills to help your clients fix some of these common faults, although it's not going to be all-inclusive, or this would be an entire day or 10-hour clinic on how to fix and program for these different faults of squat, bench, deadlift. We could easily do an entire seminar on each one of those. Then we'll cover our setup, which I am going to touch on here just because I really like to hone that setup in and make it something that you guys are starting to understand and just remember and rehearse. Definitely something you should write down on your clipboard, put in a note in your phone, take it to the actual gym floor when you're working with clients. With that, there'll also be movement prep covered. So here's just a little more theoretical or conversation piece about the squat, covering either things a little more in depth but not under the bar in a movement sense, more theoretical talking points for you to understand some of the important nuances of squat. And then of course you'll see something similar with bench and deadlift. So it's really important to talk about technique versus strength. By taking the coach's cert level 1 with Lord, you know that he puts a big emphasis on biomechanics and correct positioning and technique. If you've followed anything we've done at Kabuki Strength for some time, you know that's also very important to us. Now, while I bring this up, it'll be a similar talk in bench press and deadlift as well, different nuances of those lifts, but a lot of times coaches want to program things to make athletes stronger. That sounds crazy, but there's a caveat to that. And you'll get where I'm going. If the person has big biomechanical faults, that's going to be a problem. Now, if they're not going to get injured and you're working on their technique, that's not necessarily a bad thing to clean that up and continue to get them stronger. That's not what we're saying. And we're also not on the very far physical therapy spectrum or functional trainer spectrum where I say you can't squat with a bar on your back until you can show me a perfect goblet squat and a body squat, then we'll progress to fronts and backs. That's not what we're saying here. What we're after is if your lifter keeps failing, for this example, we'll talk about coming out of the hole. And it's the one I'll stick with here for a minute. If I come out of the hole and I have massive T-spine flexion and that dumps the bar forward and pops my hips up, thus I dump a bar over my head or just get stuck and run out of steam when it gets heavy. So I hit depth pretty good and then this happens and then this starts to happen. Maybe I grind it out, maybe I don't. Whether I fail or not, but that's definitely my sticking point in my squat. And it comes from a technical failure, a breakdown. It's not coming from a lack of strength. Now, here's where it gets a little dicey depending on which coach you talk to. You could say there's two sides of the spectrum. We could say the athlete doesn't have enough back strength to fix that or to hold position, therefore we're going to program them safety bar squats, front squats, good mornings, band extensions, reverse hyper, glute ham raises, all these different things to strengthen the upper back. I could agree with that. More in that in programming. That's not inherently bad, but what we're saying in this example is if you continue to build your athlete stronger without fixing that technical fault, they're now just a stronger, crappy lifter, right? Let's say in this example, their squat PR is about 500 pounds. On the platform, maybe they grind that out, missing 510, 520 in the gym or on the platform. You can see they have the strength there out of the hole. If we make them stronger to where they now can squat 550, that's great. We did part of our job. The athlete now squats 550, but it looks the exact same. So they're a stronger, crappy lifter. What we want in the squat is first, before we dive into the programming, to assess the technical failures and faults. That's why we jump into what we see as common faults, fixes, and a setup to help make them bulletproof. That's covered before we jump into programming. If we correct and align their body in better position, they now will be able to exert force better through their feet, through the floor, up through their body, into the barbell. Thus, not only are they safer and they look better on the platform, making you, the coach, look better, but they're now producing more force, they're getting stronger, etc., etc. So a lot of coaches will battle back and forth on that and say, nope, they just need to get stronger and it's a posterior chain problem. I can again agree with that to recap, but if the technical fault is still there, they're now a stronger, same crappy lifter. And it's very frustrating when lifters have the same fault. They're still dropping a deadlift, hitching a deadlift, they're still dumping a bar and missing off their chest. These faults, even though they're stronger, it's very frustrating. If you can clean them up, the example we've used here in the squat, hitting depth good, back rounds out of the hole, butt pops up first. If you can correct that, you're an awesome coach and you're going to get much better results and safer clients in the long run. So remember, one of my favorite quotes, a good movement should start in position, stay in position during execution of the lift, and finish in position. We might need to build up a little strength in the upper back here. I won't disagree with that. But if we can cue the athlete to hit depth and drive collarbone into the bar, in this example, a cue we like to use, they will come up and out in good position. Thus, they have the ability to handle more load. When we start working with a lot of athletes and we correct positional degradation first, we make sure that they start in position, stay in position, and finish in good position, we get better strength results right out of the gate. We've seen people put 50 pounds on a deadlift, 30 pounds on a bench, 50 pounds on a squat in the same session. When you can do that for your clients and they've worked with somebody else before, they're gonna think you're magic, right? Like, how did this guy do this? Maybe it's something somebody talked to them about before, but they didn't have the buy-in or they didn't have the technical know-how to fix that issue. When you can correct it in person or virtual, your worth just went through the roof. So when assessing the squat, we're giving just one simple example here. You really need, we'll give you a little bit of a checklist here to go through, but you really need to assess the movement. Then once that's corrected and assessed, the cueing's done, movement prep is done, the athlete's moving better, then you can work your programming mastery. So let's chat about the squat here for a second. We could argue to look top down or bottom up. I'm fine with whichever way you guys want to do it, as long as you assess all the points. Shoulders, T-spine, head position, breathing and bracing, hips, feet. All of our key points are covered, that's okay. From a fighting background, I like to look from the ground up. I'm used to watching people's feet as they move, looking at center mass, seeing what their feet are doing, so it's carried over for me as a coach. I'll go feet, knees, hips, lower torso, breathing, bracing, upper back and shoulders, and then finish with head position. That is not an order of priority, that's just the order I view it in. So I don't have to go up, down, left, right, center, and get lost. What have I checked off? Feet, how are they? Good. Hips, got some stuff going on. Wow, breathing and bracing, there's a lot of stuff going on. Shoulders, yes, if I had to prioritize those. Breathing and bracing, foot vault, and then we'll address the shoulder if the athlete has the competency left in the training session to accept all those cues. If not, we're gonna go right to breathing and bracing. If breathing and bracing isn't as atrocious as horrible foot movement and rooting skills, well then we'll jump right there. So again, I just like to assess feet, hips, breathing, bracing, shoulders. I like to go ground up. Whichever way works for you is fine. Just check off all your key points. You should know plenty about rooting at this point in time and what we're looking for with shoes and good contact. Just remember those 3 key points of the foot. Some athletes and coaches like to call it 4 key points, and I'm totally fine with that. Assessing each part of the heel, so when we have more heel roll from one side, if we're dead center, sometimes with like a floss band test that we show in our videos here for you, that can get missed. So shoes, just recapping on foot, cause a lot of problems if you, the coach, do not have a great eye for movement. It's going to be a challenge for you. Just get shoes off. If you're virtual, get a barefoot squat assessment. Lifters, weightlifting shoes, commonly called squat shoes, but they're not. That's not what they were designed for, right? Those can cause even more problems because they're so hard and flat. It's harder to see movement of the foot in those. You gotta have a pretty good eye to see what's going on unless it's horrible. And yes, if you assess them barefoot and then they throw on lifters, their mechanics have changed, but just humor yourself and your client and make sure that while you're taking on new clients, we're assessing foot so that can be checked off. Most of knee problems will take care of themselves with the hip, as we're gonna show. So remember, people want to talk the knees out cue. It's not one of our favorites because the knee is not designed to go this way. It's really bad when it happens. It's a hinge joint that's designed to go this way. There is a little bit of rotation aspect that's available, but nothing that's going to be the great degree that we really have to look at that and assess that. Hips are the next big key point. If our foot and our hips are on point, knee is going to be doing its job. The imbalances that we'll get into in the biomechanical analysis of our movements, or if you've already seen that chapter, that dives in a lot deeper about tight adductors versus turned off glutes and the such. So I want to give you more assessment ability here. One thing we like to talk about with the squat, I'll just jump right in here, is foot width. Now, hip morphology definitely changes how we coach the squat. Not everybody should squat like this, or like this, or like this. One of the hard parts if you get into equipped lifting is most suits, especially you get into multiply, are a little easier to load with a wider stance. That's why most people gravitate out. But we're changing the game when we talk about that. There's not a ton of equipped lifters out there. It's a little more nuanced topic, but even with those, that doesn't mean everybody should squat this wide. I used to, and I had some faults. I just watched everybody squat that wide and multiply, so I tried it. I thought it should work for me. When I was working with coaching staff here at Kabuki, before Kabuki even existed, we were just the gym elite performance center. We really worked on my ability to root my feet and brought my stance in because I just couldn't do it out there. I didn't have the hip mobility to root my feet good out there. And squat shot up by like 50 pounds and I felt more stable. So for our raw athletes, what I love to see is just give them a squat assessment here. I tell them, squat uncomfortably close. So if they're a close stance squatter, that may not work, but most people are about here. So give them a toe straight ahead, close shoulder width or closer squat. Then watch them squat down and see if they can hit depth, or do they go into butt wink to find depth. Most people will. Then we'll have them take a wider stance squat than they normally would and see, can they hit depth, or do we get knee cave and butt wink again? Most people probably will. So then we'll find our normal-ish stance. We'll get some good rooting and we'll squat down and we'll be in great position, generally speaking. I love doing this in live seminars when we can line up 15, 20, 30 people side by side. Seen some really unique examples of athletes being able to squat here. And they might even be tall athletes to make the conversation even more interesting, where you're like, you definitely don't have the body type to squat this narrow. And they can hit depth perfectly, perfect depth, without any butt wink. You're like, how did that just happen in front of me? Sometimes the same athlete can also go way out here and squat. And those are the ones I personally get jealous of. I'm like, you can squat close, medium, super wide. Like, how do you do it? Their hip structure's different. For most of us, we're not gonna have that much variability. A lot of times we can clean up squat width by just correcting proper rib cage over pelvis positioning, locking in a solid brace, and really focusing on rooting the feet. That clears up a lot of athletes' issues from what we've seen. If it doesn't, watch the rest of this squat assessment. I will not move the width of my femur. I will give you a sneak peek, and I will rotate my femur. So from here, if I try to hit good quality depth, I can't, I will run into myself. I can get down, but I'm gonna find butt wink, my back's gonna round. I'm running into my own femurs. I'm not a huge person, so if I was, 300-400 pounds, this might even be compounded more because of more tissue here. Rotate out. Did not change the width of my femur, and boom. If I had better overhead squat mobility, I could probably overhead squat from that position. So note some of the changes that coaches and athletes miss all the time. They go from here like, well, I can't hit depth. I also can't hit depth. I guess I just have to work on mobility. We can fine tune pivoting on the heels or pivoting on the toes to change the angle of the femur without gravely changing the angle of the squat. It's a great pro tip that will help you fine tune a lot of athletes' squats. If they can feel comfortable in a more normal or more advantageous position for them, I promise the change in the squat setup will be much easier. If you take an athlete, and sometimes we have to, so it's not bad. If you take an athlete who's squatting this wide and you bring them into here, it's going to feel really awkward at first, right? It might take them some time to adjust. If the only adjustment is 3-step walkout, boom, boom, it's gonna be much, much easier. It's not always that easy, but when you can, it'll make your job a lot easier and it'll make compliance from the athlete also easy. So to recap on one of our favorite assessments, do it barefoot. Have the athlete first squat close, feet pretty straight ahead. Have the athlete squat wide, toes pretty far out. Usually somewhere in the middle, everybody finds their happy spot, and they can change the angle of the foot in or out. Some people can't do this as well. They need to be here. That will help them find optimal depth, taking away hip pain, back pain, things like that, making your job easier on the platform so referees aren't constantly throwing red lights for depth. The squat assessment we do with floss is great. We show it with a goblet squat. If you can find optimal stance there, you should be able to have your athlete squat in that position, high bar or low bar, with zero problems. It's also worth diving in briefly to bracing. I know we talk about it extensively in the next sections, but we've got to learn to fix our breathing faults. If I'm standing here, I step out with a bar, I walk out, and I breathe up into this quadrant, understand what that's doing to the athlete's spine under load, mostly their inability to maintain optimal bracing. And it's frustrating to see as a coach when we see the unrack's pretty good, the walkout's pretty good. They didn't do that when they were getting underneath the bar, but right before they squat, this happens. The other major bracing fault we see is the walkout, and then right before they go, their hinge is off. That's why we spend multiple or a fair amount of time talking about hinge mechanics in squat and deadlift for you guys. They walk the bar out, and the first movement is butt tips back before they descend, versus this stays same levels, stays rigid, hinge into descent. We like to watch with a belt on. My belt is black, so it can be hard to see on a black shirt. If so, tell your athlete to wear a white shirt for you that day and squat, right? When we can see the belt, my hand will be a great example here, and I breathe up, you can see the change between these two levels. As soon as I tip this way, the angle of my belt is completely different. Fabric of the shirt is great to watch too. If there's loose fabric here, if I tighten it up, I change my back a lot. If it was already tight and it pulls my shirt down, again, I've obviously changed that fabric or the length tension relationship between the anterior and posterior musculature. Fancy for just saying we've lost our brace. There's no way we'll have the ability to maximally stabilize that cylinder when there's changes in it. T-spine mobility is probably the third key point that gets overlooked by athletes and coaching staff. It can be worse with bigger athletes, especially big bench pressers, real strong females and males that are just bigger humans with tight shoulders. But we can also have some pretty skinny, pretty lanky athletes that are also just pretty inflexible. When we cannot get our hand on the bar in optimal position, it's not always shoulder mechanics. T-spine mobility, although we don't have much ability to flex T-spine, something to talk about in the bench press section, we can get out of this bad posture position and into what we would like to see for neutral spine. Have to understand the relationship between T-spine and shoulder mobility. They go hand in hand. If we do not assess one or both of those together, you're missing a huge opportunity to put more weight on the squat bar for your athletes. The example I gave here earlier, the start of this section, where we hit depth and T-spine collapses, we round, butt pops up first, whether we finish it or not. A lot of times that's a T-spine mobility issue, not necessarily the ability to hold position, but it's a mobility issue with the shoulder girdle and overall back hip mobility as we enter depth. That's why it collapses at the deepest part of the squat. It's not the only reason. That's just another good example to bring up. A lot of coaches are like, well, you could grab the bar fine, you looked good, I just have to get your back stronger. And then again, they went from 500 pounds to 550. Yes, you got their squat up, but they still look the same. They still have the same fault. The stronger we get, more dangerous it is, right, to have these faults. Risk of injury goes up slightly as we get stronger. So do not neglect your shoulder and spine mobility assessments. I feel like it's such a hot topic in bench, and then we get to squat and it's like hip mobility, hip mobility, hip mobility, hip mobility, hip depth, go. No, it's not going to be optimal. And when that happens, just to continue to harp on upper back, right? Imagine bar placement correctly over shoulder, hip, and foot. As I hinge, that should start to go. If I round my upper back, just look where my hand went, right? I displaced forward inch or two, probably closer to 2 inches of bar mechanics. That's significant, and the athlete will feel that load. Wouldn't we rather have that stacked more optimally because we've also checked off shoulder and T-spine mobility? So now the bar can be seated better over shoulder, over hip, over foot throughout the entirety of the squat, right? Front squat versus back squat. Most people can back squat more. All right, let's jump over to our setup real quick. So with squat, we'll dive this in depth, but I just want you to hear about it one time so you can be excited to actually see it live. Step 0 for us, as we call it, is really alignment. And this is where the athlete should check the squat rack, their last chance to check their belt, hit their ammonia, get hyped up, do whatever silly stuff they're gonna do. But we should still be calm enough that we can methodically go through this checklist. I get surprised, even on a big platform with great spotters and loaders, national level, world level platform, something's off and the athlete doesn't check it because they are never used to just walk up and perform. Just go. Check your surrounding areas. Take time. Look left, right, left, right. Make sure your hands are even on the bar. That's on you as an athlete. So coaches, teach your athletes that so they don't make those mistakes in front of you, whether it's a local meet or a world meet. Then we get into the nuts and bolts of it. We're suggesting that you find your optimal rib cage position. Neutral spine, right? Popular buzzword. Rib cage over pelvis. That includes the head. A lot of athletes get in bad positions, they walk out and then they try to correct it. That makes no sense to our brain. If you know this is where you go right before you get that squat command, why are we unracking like this? Just unrack in a good position, start, execute, and finish in a good position. You'll get stronger and you'll look a lot better while you're lifting. So step 1, set that ideal position before you do anything else under the bar. Step number 2, everybody wants to talk about lat engagement. Here's your chance. Engage your lats. This is not lat engagement. The further I go this way, the more that lengthens this muscle. We just need good engagement, and that's really just so the shoulder girdle is seated correctly on the rib cage and on the back. We don't want a scapula up here when we squat. It's lengthening that lever arm. Whether you're high bar or low bar, we still don't want to be up here. Get that seated correctly so we take the shoulder out of the equation. This is our chance to brace, and we always say it that way, and breathe into that brace to finish IAP. If you're doing that backwards, don't worry, we'll dive in more in depth, but remember to brace first, breathe into that brace, that finishes IAP. Root those feet. Some people disagree with the step, oh, you don't need to root your feet until you walk out, but the amount of errors we see and foot movement while people unrack the bar with heavy weights is astonishing. If you're gonna walk around with a heavy bar on your back, you should be thinking about your feet before you do so. The entire squat, all the way back in, those feet should be something you're cognizant of. So right before we unrack that bar, we're gonna root those feet. This, at this point in time and done in this sequence, quads are gonna be a little activated. That gives you global tension into the bar. This is where, if it's lighter weights, it'd be popping off. This is where you finish the unrack and stand tall. We'll cover extensively our 3-step walkout and why. Once you're out, this is true for most lifts, reinforce everything. In between reps, reinforce everything. Once you're there, all you have to do is execute. Your job is done. So, step 0, pre-check, right? Pre-check under flight. Alignment. Everything you can think of, make it perfect. Make it methodical every time. Under the bar, rib cage over pelvis position. Find your best neutral spine, including your head. Depress scapula. Engage your lats. Sorry, that's step number 2. I'm counting alignment. Brace. Breathe into that brace. Step number 3. Finishing our IAP. Root your feet. Number 4. Number 5 is kind of a flow. This global tension should already have been created. The bar is starting to pop off. Stand tall, finish the unrack. Step number 6, our 3-step walkout. Own those steps. Step number 7, you've already walked out. Just go back through, check everything real quick. Do I still have neutral spine alignment? Did I look down, right? Are my lats engaged? Can I brace any harder? Do I need more air? Am I aware of my feet? If so, you checked everything off. Execute the lift. Back to the early portion of this, we feel it's really important to dive in, and drive home that a good movement should start in position, stay in position, and finish in position. Ideally, if we want to talk awesome programming to wrap up and strength levels, it should be, if we miss a squat, that it's missed here with no positional degradation. Nothing happened outside of the norm. Elbows didn't wing forward, I didn't have a hip shift, butt didn't pop up, head didn't pop up, I didn't lose my brace. When we see that from our athletes, they're safer, they look cleaner, but now our job is halfway done. Now all we have to do is be intelligent with our programming, and we can continue to make the athlete stronger. It's harder to fix multiple movement faults and have some of the best programming that's out there. Hopefully this gets you excited for the next sections where we talk faults and our actual fixes for those faults, along with our setup and our squat performance points.